Since it is. Thank you, Monique. And Stephanie, do you want to provide some of these? There we go. So we like to open every meeting with reminding folks about our mission at the Department of Environmental Quality. And our mission really is to be a leader in restoring, maintaining, and enhancing the quality of Oregon's air, land, and water. So welcome. Thank you for everybody who is in attendance. And today we do hope to have this more as a question and answer session. But Stephanie, do you want to do next slide, please? So we do have several of our panel in attendance, and hopefully Kathleen George will be joining us shortly. But I'd like to introduce ourselves. So I will start. My name is Molly Kyle. I am one of the Environmental Quality Commissioners that sits on the panel and is responsible for hiring the new director. So, oh, and we're seeing a little chat that Kathleen's on her way. So Kathleen will join us here shortly. When I am not an Environmental Quality Commissioner, my day job is I'm a professor here at Oregon State University, and my specialty really is in public health and environmental health sciences. Nancy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. I'm Nancy Bennett. I am DEQ's Policy and External Affairs Manager, and I work on a lot of our legislative work and supervise our government relations staff and budget team and work on a lot of rulemakings and also work closely with our Environmental Quality Commission. Really happy to be here. And I'm one of the staff members that's helping with this director recruitment process. So I'm also a good person to ask questions to about that. And maybe I'll pass it along next to Dan.
Hi, Nancy, or thank you, Nancy, and hi, everyone. My name is Dan Cummings, and I am an Executive Vice President and Managing Director of EFL Associates, which is a retainer-based recruitment firm. We do considerable work in the public sector. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado, although I happen to be in Tucson, Arizona right now. I'm at a conference here, but I'm delighted to be working with DEQ again and the fine team on the EQC and the team at the agency itself. So thank you.
And we'll just kind of let Kathleen introduce herself as soon as she gets here. So next slide, please. So this is really meant to be an information session for the new Department of Environmental Quality Director. The position is open. So we're hoping that the people in attendance, if you have questions, this is the time to ask them. So we do have some instructions here, which is, I'm sure many people are familiar with chat, but you should be able to see a Q&A button icon down at the bottom of your screen. So if you could please type your question into the Q&A box, we'll be able to see it and then we'll respond to it verbally. The session is being recorded, so we'll make this all publicly available when we're done. And the questions will be displayed on the screen for the panelists, but not necessarily the audience. So you won't, the people who are in attendance, you won't, it is meant to be an anonymous situation. You won't be able to see the names of each other or who's typing the panel, typing the questions, but we will be able to see them and answer them accordingly. So the panelists, please intend to answer as many questions as, we'll intend to answer as many questions as possible. Not all questions may be addressed during this session, and we do refer you back to the job description as much as possible. And I'm seeing a note here from Stephanie. Kathleen's here now?
Yes, and thank you. This is Stephanie Caldera, the Commission Assistant. EQC Chair Kathleen George has accessed the meeting, and we'll get you set up as co-host in just a moment here. So Chair George, once we have you with those permissions, we just went through a quick introduction if you'd like to introduce yourself, and that would be fantastic.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Kathleen George and I'm the chair of the Environmental Quality Commission. I do apologize, I was having some technical difficulty connecting tonight, but Stephanie worked me through it. So I'm really glad to be here with you all. and hope that we can have a great question and answer session and help people consider this really exciting opportunity. So please go ahead, Molly. I think you were kind of setting things up. So why don't you just go ahead and finish that?
Fantastic. In which case, next slide, please, Stephanie. So actually, this whole application is through the Workday application system. It will be down for maintenance from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, October 12th to 14th. So we really do apologize for any inconvenience this might pose in your applications, but we wanted you to be aware of this. And if you do have any questions, I believe you can contact Maddie. Her contact details are there. But please plan accordingly to complete your application by midnight Pacific Standard Time on Sunday, October 16th for full consideration. If you need assistance, please contact Maddie by 4 p.m. on Friday, October 14th. So her email address is right there, maddie.oev@deq.oregon.gov. And she can also help you with the Workday, any glitches or issues that you arise with that. Next slide, please. So we want to thank you all for your continued commitment to Oregon's environment and for considering the DEQ Director position. We do want to make sure that you are aware and have seen the job description. So please check the recruitment webpage for additional details and process information. The link is here on the slide, but it is oregon.gov.deq or /DEQ/about-us, the EQC pages and recruitment 2022. That is a long link. A lot of the DEQ links are long, so you can also easily Google it by just looking for DEQ Director job posting, and it'll pop right up. So I think that was the end of the introduction slides, wasn't it, Stephanie, or is there one more?
No, Commissioner Kyle, that is the end. I'll go back to the slide that indicates how, if a person wants to ask a question, to please use the question and answer box. You should see that, I believe it's in the participants panel. It might depend on which Zoom version you're using, but the panelists will see that question. We will read it verbally so that everyone present can hear the question, and then panelists will have the opportunity to respond.
Yeah. So Kathleen, is there anything you'd like to add at this point in time? You're muted.
Well, somebody needed to do it, so I'm glad I got it out of the way so others that don't have to. One of the things that we had talked about sharing a little bit about, and forgive me because I was having that technical difficulty, is sharing a little bit about how the DEQ Director is a bit unique among tribal state agency directors. In that it is hired and the direct supervisor is the Environmental Quality Commission. Did you already spend some time on that, Molly?
I didn't, but that would be a great opportunity right now. If you want to, yeah.
I mean, I think that's something that would reasonably be on anybody's mind who is considering applying for the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality, is to know the reporting structure and how that works. And so unlike several state agencies that report directly to the governor, in this case, the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality reports to a 5-member commission, of which Molly and I are 2 members, and that's a governor-appointed commission who acts as a regulatory body, a decision maker, a regulator, but also that helps set the policy agenda for the Department of Environmental Quality. Now, the EQC certainly consults with the governor when making a decision to hire a new director. And of course, I think we all appreciate that we are coming up on an election. So the EQC is well aware of this, and we anticipate the process moving forward for when we think we are getting close to having finalists. We will be checking in with the governor's office. The governor's office is fully informed of our plans and how we intend to proceed. So we will extend that coordination with the governor, and typically the finalists have an opportunity to meet with and speak with the governor. But then we also anticipate that before all is said and done, we will have a new governor. And so there will be an opportunity for us to consult with the new governor as well. And that being said, it is not actually the governor that makes this decision. It's the Environmental Quality Commission. And so we are going to proceed in this manner. And if you should choose to apply and become a finalist, you'll have an opportunity to speak with the governor. DEQ has an ambitious agenda, and we are looking forward to recruiting our next director and continuing that apace. So we really look forward to hearing from you and hearing what questions you have as you consider our requirements for this new job position or this new request for the next director of the Department of Environmental Quality.
Yeah.
Molly or Nancy? Yeah, go ahead. Molly or Nancy, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was going to say we have actually some questions in the Q&A, which is the first question is, where is the job located? And that would be Portland. So I think that was the easy question at the moment. And then I did see a question that was dropped over in the chat, which is, what is the EQC's decision-making process? And how does the engagement work with the DEQ director? So Kathleen, as the chair, do you want to take that one?
Sure. To the question, okay. So taking first things first, I'm not sure if the questioner is asking what is the EQC's decision-making process in regard to the director, but I'm going to start there. And Molly and I have been appointed by the rest of the commission to do much of this preliminary work, the communication with potential applicants, working with the recruitment team to screen initial applicants. But when that pool has been brought down to the pre-finalist stage, then all of those applicants will be shared with the Environmental Quality Commission, and we will discuss them and agree together in public session about who we think the finalists should be. The members of the EQC are also going to have opportunities along the way to review questions and things like that, so that they can ensure that we are asking and seeking the right information along the way. How does the engagement work with the DEQ director? So the DEQ director communicates with all of the commission members. We have regularly scheduled public meetings that typically occur about every other month and fairly regularly. Typically, the director will also have more regular check-ins with the chair and the vice chair. And then quite often, as regulatory decisions are coming up, the director will work with staff, relevant staff, to make sure that all the EQC members are briefed up and ready and comfortable for any upcoming decisions that might occur during a commission meeting. The director would not necessarily set in on all of those, but often does if it's any sort of important matter that impacts the objectives of the Department of Environmental Quality. Before moving on, Molly, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you covered the process that we're going to have for the decision-making for this hiring. We also do have where the EQC is actually a rule-making body for the agency. And so we have decision-making capacity when it comes to promulgating new rules and regulations. Ultimately, we are the vote that evaluates whether those get accepted or not. The second part of that question is, how is the EQC membership selected? And as Kathleen mentioned, we were all appointed by the governor at various different times. I don't think we knew each other when we were appointed a couple of years ago, and we all come from very different backgrounds. So I think we were selected for kind of our expertise with regard to how it would be related to the agency. Nancy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add, when you talk about how the EQC membership is selected, you're absolutely right. Governor recommends members, and then they actually go through a Senate confirmation process. And so it can take a while, and there has to be the right moment for that Senate confirmation process to happen. It doesn't happen all the time. So sometimes you can have a bit of a gap between when you need to appoint a new member and when the Senate can take action. But they routinely are appointing boards and commission members. So it's really a partnership between the governor and the Senate leadership.
Mm-hmm. And that second part of, and does the membership change with changes in political leadership? Historically, the answer has been no. I think the EQC commissioners have largely been outside of that elected change cycle. That being said, we do serve at the pleasure of the governor. So they have the ability to fire us. But for the most part, I think historically, they've always stayed through. Are there other questions out there?
And this is Stephanie Caldera. I am the assistant to the Environmental Quality Commission. Just a note for folks who are joining us today, if you do have questions, you can enter those into the Q&A. You should see that at your participants list. We have received an additional question in that through that mechanism. And so Chair George, Commissioner Kyle, the question we received is the number of EQC members fixed? So noting, is that a steady number or is that a changeable number?
The number of environmental quality commissioners is 5. And I believe that to change that would require legislative action. So not impossible, but also not likely.
And Chair George, Commissioner Kyle, at this time, we don't have any more open questions. We do welcome folks to ask questions related to the DEQ Director position, the recruitment, Oregon DEQ, to learn more as a potential applicant for this director's position.
In attendance as well, I'd just like to point out that Nancy Bennett, who is fabulous, also serves as part of the leadership team, which is really integral in the Department of Environmental Quality's leadership and management. So if you have questions that would be directed towards Nancy, that's also an opportunity to talk to some of the DEQ leadership.
I'm glad you raised that, Molly. And well, while we're waiting for any additional questions, Nancy, if you don't mind, would you take a minute or so to describe the leadership team that we've developed at DEQ? Because this really is, I think, a very strong and effective leadership team. And I think that, you know, someone who is considering the position should know the team they have that's ready to support them in a number of capacities. So why don't you go ahead and describe the leadership team?
Yeah, happy to do that. So we have, I'm now actually, I should know how many members, I think about 12 or 13 members of a leadership team. And we have members that represent each of our regional offices. So we have division sort of directors from the different regions, Western region, Eastern region, and Northwest region offices. And then we also have representatives from each of our what we call media divisions. So that's an air quality division administrator, our water quality division administrator, and our land quality division administrator. We also have our legislative coordinator and our communications manager that sits on the leadership team to really kind of help bring that sort of well-rounded perspectives. And then right now we're have our acting director, Leah Feldon, who's doing a really terrific job in kind of guiding our agency right now. And we just have a very collaborative leadership style at the agency and a lot of, I think, really talented and experienced staff. It's been a real pleasure to work with this team. And Everybody sort of comes with their, unique backgrounds and experiences, and we work really well together, just trying to solve, all the different issues and challenges that come our way. And we meet more often now. We meet, I'd say, probably every couple of weeks. And we have some other we've also organized ourselves into some other little subgroups just so we can be really effective. So we have an operations group that just really dives into operational issues. And then we have another group that we call EPIC, and they really focus on policy conversations and make sure we have a lot of that cross sort of division conversation, because it's really important to do that. And I'm seeing a couple more questions come in into the chat here, into the question and answer. And I'm happy to take a stab at some of these, and others may want to as well.
And so just for folks on the recording note, the questions we have received, the first question is, what are the engagement mechanisms with respect to federal agencies such as EPA?
And I'm happy to maybe start with that one. We have regular meetings. There's a Region 10 office that's based in Seattle, but then there's an Oregon EPA office. So we have regular meetings with both Region 10 and with our Oregon office and our Oregon counterparts. We work really closely kind of across the agency, I would say, with EPA, especially the regional folks. And each of our media administrators or our division administrators each kind of have their own counterparts at EPA and their own relationships and own issues that we're working with EPA on particular issues. And so obviously we're also receiving federal grants. And so we have a lot of sort of requirements and reporting requirements. And it really sort of depends, I think, on some of the different issue areas, sort of the level of engagement that we have with EPA, or if we have sort of federal delegated authority in particular areas. So I would say it's a frequent level of engagement with EPA, but I wonder if either Kathleen or Molly, if you have had any impressions with our relationship to EPA that you want to add.
Well, I think you've really done a good overview, Nancy. You mentioned, of course, there are certain federally delegated authorities that DEQ implements for the state of Oregon, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, where DEQ, or the state of Oregon, I should say, certainly has its own regulatory authority and rules in this regard, but also is the implementation entity responsible for those things and certain cleanup actions. There'd be a number of these areas in which DEQ has to consult with the Environmental Protection Agency. Also, when issues potentially might interact with other federal authorities, such as the Endangered Species Act, or certain health regulations that would be directly pertinent to the work of DEQ. So I would think the answer is kind of often. And I think Nancy's also right in saying that the EPA Oregon lead or director is a very close communication, regular communication type of relationship.
And Kathleen, one of the things that is kind of unique, I think, in Oregon is that we do have 7 recognized federal tribes. Do you want to speak perhaps to the mechanisms with respect to how the DEQ director interacts with tribal governments?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. The state of Oregon actually has its own executive order directing all state agencies to develop consultative relationships with our 9 federally recognized tribes. And so whenever an action is taken that may impact tribes or their resources, which of course are not limited to their reservations, but extend beyond tribal lands, we have a very close and regular communications with our tribes, including an annual summit where the governor and all the agency heads for the state of Oregon meet with the tribes. So that is also a very rich area of consultation.
Forgive me for misquoting the number of tribes. So there is a second question in here, which is, what is the process and forums for collecting general public inputs on policy formation and rulemaking? Kathleen, we'll take that one too.
I'll take a shot at it. So I want to make sure, first of all, that I'm getting the question right. So what is the process and forums for collecting general public inputs on policy formation and rules making? So I'm going to start with rulemaking, because DEQ has rules regarding the making of rules. And so before a rulemaking decision ever comes to the Environmental Quality Commission, there is required public comment period. But in addition to that, very often, well, almost always, perhaps always, our staff are already aware and have longstanding relationships with many of the people and organizations who often interact on these issues. So let's say it's a regulatory issue, that might impact a certain industry or other land management use or business group. DEQ very proactively reaches out to folks who they know may be interested in a rulemaking and engages them, long before a public comment period. Very often there are official panels or input groups that are established long before a rulemaking that bring to the table all those interested parties. So that might be regulated parties, that might be resource advocates, it might be health advocates, whoever the players are, or those who come forward and ask to be involved. Typically there's an advisory body that works with DEQ prior to the development of the proposed rule. Excuse me. Gosh, I'm sorry. So there's plenty of opportunity for that. Now for policy, policy could be very wide ranging, right? It could be everything from internal management policy to a state policy that DEQ has an opportunity to have a part in or a responsibility for. And so I think that also is as a kind of reiterative and communicative process. It would be discussed with the EQC in any way in which EQC needs to oversee and direct policy in terms of the actions of DEQ. We also work closely on some more administrative type policies with DAS, the administrative arm of state government. So I think it probably has more on the policy side to do with the particular issue at hand. So one of the things that of course is an annual requirement or a regular and reoccurring requirement that we never really completely escape for, because once one budget is prepared, you start the preparation for the other. So even something as straightforward in some ways as the budget, turns out that there are many opportunities for people to influence what will become policy outcomes, because we know that what's approved and what isn't approved in a budget will very directly impact the actions of the agency. Would anybody else like to speak to an aspect of that perhaps I overlooked?
I would just add, I think you did a great job explaining all of that. And I would just mention that I think DEQ, well, one, we take public comment, obviously at our commission meetings. We take public comment, in lots of formal ways, but then we have lots of informal conversations, and we're really open for that consultation with lots of different community organizations or stakeholder groups, and often just will set up, again, sort of meetings, formal meetings, or even one-on-one conversations, because that input is really important to us, very helpful to us in thinking through policy decisions, thinking through implementation decisions, thinking about who's going to be supporting or opposing, and kind of how do we work together. So I would say that to me, that's one of the most important parts of our job, and it's something we all put a lot of effort into and would continue to do. It's just a really important part of how we get to the final decisions on issues.
Another kind of fact-based piece of information that a potential applicant might be interested in is the sheer size and scope of DEQ's employees and administration. So DEQ has over 700 employees located throughout the state. Nancy mentioned the regional offices. So while DEQ's largest office is certainly in Portland, the director certainly has to go to Salem on a regular basis to work with on the budget or with legislators or the natural resources, governor's natural resource policy cabinet. But then we have a variety of regional offices, and I'm not sure that I know the exact number. If somebody does, I'll reach out for that help, but I know they're in Bend, they're in Pendleton, they're really all across the state.
Right, and just also mentioning we have an office in Eugene and Medford, and we have sort of satellite people in Klamath Falls, I believe, and Coos Bay, and also the Dalles. So we're kind of try to be really in communities throughout the state and kind of have those more local perspectives. That's part of why we have local offices and try to be more embedded in local communities as much as possible. Yes, thank you. Stephanie's also mentioning North Coast Tillamook has a staff person out there to deal with, and we have many conversations in coastal communities. It's a big and Owen is asking, what are the functions of the local office? You know, that's where we actually carry out a lot of our permit actions at in those regional offices. So we're working with communities around issues, but we're also working with facilities in the regulated community on our permits. And so it's really the regional offices that kind of carry out a lot of that on the ground work. Whereas in our headquarters office, it's more of sort of the policy decisions and policy work that is happening there, and kind of working in concert then with the regional offices to kind of carry out and implement that work.
And certainly those regional directors are just a little closer to the communities and the businesses and the partners in that part of the state. And that kind of on the ground relationship building and knowledge is just tremendously helpful. It's so much easier to have somebody that can be working out of a Pendleton or a Bend office and to really enhance relationships and communications that would be more difficult to simply rely on coming, out of Portland. But I do think it's fair to say that the director does travel around the state a fair amount for a wide variety of meetings. And in fact, the Environmental Quality Commission has traditionally, and we hope again before too long, will be holding our meetings in different parts of the state just to meet folks, to let them come to us with their issues, their questions, and to build relationships.
Let's see, so I've kind of turned into, we do have only about 19 minutes left or so. Nancy, is there anything else that you would like to add at this point in time?
Well, let's see. I think we've covered a lot of sort of the key decisions. And kind of maybe a little bit of what is to come for a new director. What are the kinds of issues that they're likely to be faced with? I'll give a quick thought about that, and certainly like to hear from our commissioners about that. I think, we are embarking, we'll have a new governor, we'll have a new administration, we'll have new fellow agency directors throughout the state, and we'll be going into a legislative session in 2023, focusing on our next agency budget. So that's going to be a big focus. That's always a big focus for us. We do a presentation to the Ways and Means Committee, and we'll sort of see what's the state of the state budget. That often sort of dictates, what opportunities might be there, or if we're facing maybe cuts. We don't really have a sense of that quite yet. And we have a number of legislative issues. And then I would say another big thing that we're dealing with at DEQ is that we have started a variety of big programs over the last few years, and we're really at an implementation stage. The commission has adopted rules in a number of key areas like our climate protection program. And we've also, the legislature passed a very significant overhaul of our recycling program. And so there's some fairly large initiatives that we are now really at the key stage of needing to implement and mature and develop. And I think that's going to be a big focus for us. We're also always, I think, looking to have really solid, streamlined, effective permitting processes so that we can work effectively in our regulatory capacity. That's always been both a priority in our water quality and our air quality divisions in particular. And so I think that will continue to be a big focus for us over the next coming years. Those are a couple of things that are top of my mind, but I wonder if others have anything to add.
Yeah, and just to read it out loud, the question that came in are what are some of the key tasks you envision from a new director in their first year? So I think you hit some big ones. I would just kind of echo the thought that there has been a lot of big new rules, Cleaner Air Oregon, the Office of Climate Programs, some of the work with the material management. These are just starting. And so making sure that they're adequately staffed and resourced and are actually performing the way they want. So there's definitely an implementation kind of growth component there. I would also say that the agency's undergone a lot of change and reorganization under the last director. And so making sure that that reorganization and change is performing the way it was expected to make sure that we do have all of the functionality of an efficient and responsive agency. And then the other big thing that's coming up is really the role of environmental justice and making sure that the agency is becoming a more diverse and inclusive organization. So there's also a lot of internal change and improvements to be made. So those are kind of three big categories in my mind. Kathleen?
I think you are both covering it really well. Nancy, of course, is right to mention the 2023 budget process. And so representing the needs of DEQ in the legislature is obviously tremendously important to the ability of DEQ to accomplish its mission and its programmatic goals. DEQ has reacquired or been able to build staff in the last few years, which was desperately necessary to make better progress on permits and support communities and businesses that need those permits. And so that really has required investment. And so being a leader and developing those good relationships in the legislature and communicating DEQ's role, I think is really important. That's a key strength. And then I also think it's also worth mentioning that DEQ has started and will be continuing a strategic planning process. And Molly was quite right to mention the importance of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that really is absolutely integral to a solid strategic plan for the Department of Environmental Quality and engaging with environmental justice communities, and also looking at the structural way, the systems way in which agencies can include the people who environmental decisions affect most is part of our obligation. And so looking at DEQ's responsibility to do that well is a process that DEQ is going through now, and one that I think both DEQ and EQC are very committed to.
See, there has been some more questions that have been entered in. So there was a mention of the Natural Resource Cabinet and the Climate Cabinet in the position description. What are the director's roles vis-a-vis these forums?
I can answer that. So the governor's office has typically convened a natural resources cabinet, and a new governor might choose to change that. But that is usually consisted of the different agency directors from all the different natural resource agencies, and then may include other agencies that have close connections. For example, the health authority might, they might include them, or they may not. It sort of really depends. It's really at the governor's office discretion of how they might set that up. But it's a useful way for agency directors to come together around a set of issues and have, again, a little bit of that collaboration across agencies, because in the natural resources arena, we work very closely together, and it's really important. And there's some overlapping areas where we just really need to be coordinated. So that is really the purpose of that. A climate cabinet has kind of, I would say, come and gone a little bit here, and it's at times, the governor's office has convened a climate cabinet. At times they have let that go for a while. I think recently the governor has decided to sort of re-energize a climate cabinet, and that typically has consisted of some of the key agencies like DEQ, like Department of Energy, maybe like Department of Transportation, the Department of Land Conservation, together to talk, and others to talk again about sort of what are some climate strategies, or what's the coordination. So it's really, the director typically attends these meetings and really, I think, would help, potentially drive the policy decisions if there are any that come out of these. But these I see as often useful coordinating conversations and sort of information sharing among agencies.
And there was another question that's also come in, which is, what are the key success measures of the DEQ director? So that's a broad, question. Speaking personally, though, just as an environmental quality commissioner that works pretty closely with the director, success measures is the ability to communicate well with us. It's just kind of a basic, and keep the agency functioning and developing these relationships that make the agency effective. So a pretty general response there. I think a lot of the metrics are actually kind of outlined in kind of the job description itself as well. But I don't know, Kathleen, would you add to that, or Nancy?
So yeah, I think you're right that, a lot of thought went into the job description and the essential skills. And so I think those really should guide somebody who's interested. But that being said, I mean, number one, I tend to start every meeting with a reminder of what DEQ's mission is. And DEQ's mission is to be a leader in restoring, maintaining, enhancing the quality of Oregon's air, land, and water. There's Steph has it ready for us. And so that should be at the root of all of our work. That's what we are to do for the citizens of the state of Oregon. And so that's what the EQC is to do, and that's what DEQ is to do. So that should be our North Star. And then in regard to that, we mentioned the importance of, the legislative process and legislative relations. The reality is that every department has to work with the governor's office and the legislature on their budget. And if we do not have the budget necessary to accomplish our goals, then we can be in trouble as an agency. I mean, it's publicly known that one of the things that DEQ is doing right now, working very hard at, is catching up on a permit backlog, because DEQ had been chronically, and this is one citizen's opinion, underfunded in the past. And it's very difficult to keep on top of permits and the permits that need to be renewed if you simply don't have the staff to get that done. And that isn't just, what somebody might imagine is some, esoteric paper activity. These are the permits that our businesses and communities need to do the work that they need to do. And so it's critically important that DEQ have the resources available to provide the services that it needs to the citizens of Oregon. So that would be important. I think the relationship with the governor's office and the rest of the natural resource cabinet, working with them to accomplish DEQ's goals is critical, and having good communication and relationships there. I'm not sure if we've mentioned too much. I think we have mentioned, but we do have a deputy director who is currently Leah Felden, who is also our acting director at this time. And so the director does have this deputy relationship with somebody who's extremely knowledgeable about DEQ, has a tremendous depth and background experience in the agency. And I think that might be important for somebody to know as well, that they have that asset set up in that deputy director position. And then, so to some degree, it is certainly the responsibility of the director, excuse me, I have a cough tonight, to make sure that those necessary, administrative functions of DEQ are taken care of. Like everything else, that doesn't mean that the director themselves needs to do all those things, but they need to make sure that they get addressed. And then there are certain regulatory updates or regulatory timeframes that are that DEQ sometimes inherits, that aren't necessarily always of DEQ's making. Certain rules must be updated at certain intervals. And so certainly they work with the leadership team to make sure that DEQ is on top of all those types of regulatory actions that have timeframes associated with them. So those are some of the big things that come up for me when I think about those responsibilities of the director.
I'd add just one more thing, which is that I think sort of providing a steady hand. The agency, does take a lot of incoming. There's controversies. There are people who don't like what we're doing on all sides, and that having someone who can kind of maintain calm in that presence of that and really kind of keep guiding the agency forward, I think is really important. So yeah, I would just add that steady hand.
And good communicator. You're absolutely right, Nancy. Any regulator is going to have a variety of complex relationships. People who think they should be doing more, people who think they should be doing less, people who think they shouldn't be doing it at all. And so I think the director is kind of the chief communicator. Again, we have a whole communications team, both on the legislative side and on the public outreach side. So the director has plenty of support in that way, but somebody who is able to have, difficult conversations, but be honest and frank and seek solutions wherever we can find them, I think are skills that would really, really serve our director well.
So we do have kind of just 5 minutes left, which is probably enough for one more question if there's one out there. If not, I think we can all extol the virtues of living in Oregon and what a wonderful place it is to live.
Well, you're absolutely right. And we could do that for a lot longer than the 5 minutes we have left. But if anybody considering this is not very familiar with Oregon, it is an absolutely tremendously amazing place to live. We are a good-sized state, but not a tremendously populated state. And we are a place that still has tremendous amount of natural beauty, from our Oregon desert to our coast and our mountains and everything in between. Oregonians, I think, are generally very, very proud of their state, and you can probably hear that we are too. And so working with a wide variety of partners to help protect and restore Oregon's environment is work that, while challenging, is tremendously rewarding. And I think that the next director will also find that they really have a well-developed, incredibly professional a leadership team that truly cares about their job and truly cares about doing well by the state of Oregon. So I think it's an exciting time at DEQ. And I think that there's a lot of work for us to do. And but this is a department that's ready to do it.
And Chair George, Commissioner Kyle, this is Stephanie Caldera, your Commission Assistant. There are no additional questions at this time, but in terms of this evening, we had scheduled until 7 p.m. and at your discretion, would like to check in about the end of this evening or any additional information you would like DEQ to provide to any of our attendees this evening.
Stephanie, could you just go back to the slide that has the deadlines, the date? There we go. So just to remind folks that unfortunately the Workday application system is going to be down for maintenance, which is right in the middle of this job description. And if you have any questions, there is Maddie's email right there. She'd be happy to answer you. And if you're interested in the position, please get your application in by 11:59 Pacific Standard Time on Sunday, October 16th for first consideration. But with that, I don't know, Chair George. Yeah, you don't have your gavel. Do you want to call a motion to call the evening over?
I love a good gavel, but no, we're a little less formal than that tonight. Well, we hope that you found your time with us tonight to be informative and had the opportunity to throw a few questions out and learn some more about the position. We encourage you to consider it and also to share it. If you know anybody else that you think would be great for this position, please do share it. And there are contacts available on the website, so you can always check in on the recruitment webpage for any reminders or process information. So thanks very much. And with that, I think we will wish everyone a good night.
And thank you, Chair George. At this time, we will stop the recording and close our Zoom webinar. Thank you for being with us this evening and have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.